This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme.
And I'm Naweed Jabarkil. Our top stories. Investments in renewables and energy efficiency. China's plan to bring carbon emissions to a peak in the next decade.
Our other headlines: signing a deal for one of Europe's biggest ports. The Chinese foreign minister in Greece on his European tour.
Jaguar Land Rover launches its most important car for years. The company's boss tells us why the new Range Rover really is green.
Europe's top court fines Poland €1 million a day as Warsaw's row with Brussels rumbles on.
And criminal charges have not been ruled out in the fatal film shooting by US actor Alec Baldwin. As you can see, we're about to hear from the sheriff. We'll let you know what's said.
So 5 days to go to the world's big summit in Scotland, and China's special climate envoy Xi Jinping is in London for talks with EU and US officials ahead of the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow.
Our correspondent Michael Voss is following the story for us live from the London newsroom. Michael, China, the EU, the US, all major global emitters. What have they been talking about?
Well, they all agree of the importance of this upcoming COP26 summit, but there are differences over both finance and the speed of commitments to cut emissions. Now, as you say, China's green climate envoy, Xi Jinping, and Europe's green leading envoy, Franz Zimmermann, are meeting behind closed doors. We don't know what they're discussing so far. Also, we are expecting the US Special Envoy on Climate, John Kerry, will hold private meetings with the Chinese, possibly with the Europeans as well. The big development on Wednesday was that China released its white paper on climate change at a press conference in Beijing. They highlighted one of their major concerns, which is the very slow pace of the richer nations in helping the developing nations to finance and counteract the climate change. Now, back in 2009, the richer nations said they'd commit themselves to $100 billion a year to help the poorer nations. That got, by 2020, that got pushed back to 2025. Now, China is saying that this is one of the biggest obstacles to continued progress at COP26.
Developed countries should step up to fill the gap in providing $100 billion in financial support each year. This is a major issue related to mutual trust between developing and developed countries.
This white paper also fleshed out China's commitments to battling climate change. They'd already said that they would cut emissions, that emissions would peak before 2030, and that they would meet zero targets by 2060. This is much slower, for example, than the European Union. China has always said that the richer countries, which historically have emitted so much more greenhouse gases, should take a greater responsibility in combating this. Now, the white paper also did give some extra details. For example, it said that China will increase its share of non-fossil fuels to 25% by 2030, up from 20%, its previous commitment, and that it would raise installed capacity for wind and solar. One other development: China's ambassador to Britain has written a letter to the British newspaper The Guardian, pointing out that China will meet its obligations on climate change, and has said that if you look at its previous commitments, its 2020 commitments, that it has met the targets ahead of schedule.
And a lot of talk about building back greener post-COVID, Michael, especially with that COP26 summit just days away now. Any indications that's happening?
Well, quite the reverse in some ways. There was a recent report by the United Nations World Meteorological Organization which said that despite the fact that industry was running at much lower capacity during the pandemic, that actually the level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in 2020 was at its highest level ever. It hadn't gone down. It does highlight the dilemma, if you like, the balance between maintaining economic growth and also meeting long-term commitments to climate change. In China, which industry has rapidly come back on stream following the pandemic, the price of coal has shot up, and in some parts of China there have been power outages, which shows the difficulties of keeping industry running, homes heated in winter, and committing to cutting back on fossil fuels. In Europe, there's a gas problem. Gas prices have shot up, so a similar problem here. This balance between actually keeping industry going, economic growth, and funding this very important move away from fossil fuels.
Michael Voss for us in London. Thank you.
Well, it's not just national governments vexed over delivering on those climate goals. It's big companies too. For automakers, particularly those manufacturing fuel-guzzling 4x4s, the challenge is a mountain to climb.
Jaguar Land Rover will be supplying electric vehicles to world leaders at that COP26 summit. The firm has just unveiled its new Range Rover here in London, part of plans to reach net zero by 2039.
Nick Collins is Executive Director of Jaguar Land Rover's Vehicles Programme. I asked him about their new car and the role it plays in going green.
Well, we're here in London to reveal the all-new Range Rover. It's the 5th generation of Range Rover, and it really is the flagship of the Land Rover brand. But this is an all-new Land Rover and an all-new Range Rover, iconic in design and all-new from the ground up. And what's really exciting is we're unveiling this car with a range of plug-in hybrid and hybrid engines, but perhaps the most exciting news from 2024, a battery electric Range Rover.
Luxury is obviously important for wealthy consumers, but in this week of all weeks, when everyone is talking about COP and Glasgow, a world beset by climate change, can anyone really justify building this, buying it and driving it?
Well, we think so, and we're playing a very important role actually with COP26. We've got a fleet of Jaguar I-Paces up there as part of the conference. But as I just said, you know, we're going to unveil a battery electric vehicle for the new Range Rover. It's the first of 6 all battery electric Land Rovers that you're going to see between here and the end of the decade. And that's really part of our major push towards a net carbon zero business.
And most people, when they think of Land Rover, will think about those roughy-tufty vehicles that are capable of climbing up a mountain. Are you saying that you can really use electric to do all that 4x4 stuff?
Well, without actually getting into too much detail, electric is actually brilliant off-road. So this is a Land Rover. It's a true Range Rover, peerless refinement, modern luxury by design, breathtaking its modernity, but absolutely incredible on all terrains and all surfaces as well.
Are you worried about the electric charging infrastructure in Europe? I mean, I don't want to get into the granular detail about the UK, but in many parts of Europe, there is still a problem about finding suitable charging stations for electric cars.
Well, I think it's a really exciting time for our industry, and by that I mean the broader industry as well. We're all fully committed towards our net carbon zero futures, but at the heart of that is the need for those charging infrastructures. So we're really encouraging all the stakeholders to come together and work together to bring those solutions to the market. We think they will. It's going to be a very exciting time, a very exciting transition for our industry, and it's going to open up a lot of new opportunities as we go forward as well.
So at what point will you be abandoning the traditional fossil fuel cars?
Well, we've made a commitment to go fully electric with our Jaguar brand from 2025, and we're on the journey there with our Land Rover brand as well. And you're going to see us talk more about that in the future. But as I said, the all-new electric Range Rover we're announcing today is the first of 6 all-electric Land Rovers that will be coming to the market between now and the end of the decade.
And I'm sure you'll get a round of applause from some environmentalists for going electric. There is still a wider debate, isn't there, about building cars and car ownership itself. And many environmentalists will simply say to you, the honourable thing to do if you care about the environment is to use public transport. I mean, do you sense that perhaps we might be having to consider giving up that luxury of car ownership?
Well, I think there'll always be a blended solution to transportation, and we believe our cars play an important role in there. You know, what's more luxurious than an electric Range Rover going through a city with zero tailpipe emissions? You know, that's part of our commitment to that journey. But it's not just the electric Range Rover we're announcing. We're going to have a plug-in hybrid Range Rover right from early next year that's got 62 miles worth of electric-only range. And we actually see in the data we get from our existing customers that equates to about 75% of all of their journeys that they could do in fully electric. But absolutely, as we go forward through this transition, this mobility transition, there's going to be a blended solution to transportation in all sectors.
Every car boss in the world seems to have appeared on this programme, from Rolls-Royce to BMW, complaining about the global semiconductor shortage affecting their business. How is it for you?
Well, it's been a challenging time. It's a challenging time for the industry. There's obviously been COVID-19 related disturbances, and there's also been the semiconductor challenges. We're working incredibly hard with our supplier partners to navigate that. We're really pleased with how they're working with us. We've got record order bank at the moment, and we're working tirelessly with those supplier partners to reduce any impact on delivery times to our consumers.
China's foreign minister has arrived in Serbia, the second leg of his four-country tour of Europe. Wang Yi visited Greece, where he said the countries would build the port of Piraeus into a world-class shipping hub and a driving force for economic cooperation.
Well, in a moment, our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic in Belgrade. First, let's talk to our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. Evangelo, what's the big takeaway? What are the highlights of this visit?
Well, yeah, on the first day of the first leg of his trip, of the four-day trip in Europe, the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang Yi, had a chance to sit down with the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, but also with his counterpart, Nikos Dendias, to talk about a number of issues, a number of topics, from security and culture to tourism and investments. The Chinese Foreign Ministry pledged to continue and boost the cooperation between the two nations, and said that he would continue to invest more into the country's infrastructure. In his press conference, he gave three messages, three notes, saying that that China and the Chinese government will continue to give out the Olympic spirit during the Beijing Olympics in February 2022. He will continue the investments here in Greece, but also in Europe, and also would like to continue the cultural exchanges between the two countries. He mentioned specifically that Greece and China are not only they have diplomatic ties and do business with each other, but are really good friends. And that comes from the tourism year of 2021, which is between China and Greece. And next year, they're going to be completing 50 years of diplomatic and bilateral ties. He specifically stressed how important it is for China to invest on the port of Piraeus, with the ceremony taking place a few days ago of the Chinese giant Costco getting the transfer of an additional 16%, and now having the ownership of 67 in total of the port of Piraeus, and how important it is for China and also to the world, and how it's a getaway for China into Europe, but also for Europe to China. From investments and security to tourism and culture, some of the topics discussed during Wang Yi's visit to Greece. Chinese foreign minister is pledging to boost cooperation between the two nations, with three key messages for both Greeks and people across the EU: the spread of the Olympic spirit, more investment, and continued cultural connections between China and Europe.
We'd like to continue our connection with Europe, and the investment at the Piraeus port is part of the hard work we've put into building our ties and the Belt and Road Initiative. The investment has created many opportunities for Greece and created many job openings for locals. It's become the largest port in the Mediterranean. This project is an example of our good relationship.
Following talks with Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Wang Yi met with Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias. 2021 is the year of tourism between China and Greece, but there were more difficult conversations, such as Greece's maritime dispute with neighboring Turkey and how the dispute could compromise China's Belt and Road flagship European hub project, Greece's port of Piraeus.
I had the chance to inform my Chinese counterpart about the worrying developments in the East Mediterranean and the instability Turkey is creating. Of course, this area is thousands of kilometers away from China, but the instability in the area holds many worries and dangers for Chinese shipping and the development of global shipping, something that is very important to China.
The meeting followed a ceremony where Greece's privatization agency transferred an additional 16% stake in the port of Piraeus to the Chinese shipping giant COSCO, giving it a total of 67% ownership. Foreign Minister Wang Yi calls it an emblematic project within the Belt and Road Initiative, a model for mutual beneficial cooperation and a further step towards closing the gap between East and West. The investment in the port of Piraeus is very important also for the Greek economy and is very important for the Greek and the local people since it has created 10,000 jobs, and every year it will be creating 3,000 more additional.
Evangelos Ipsas in Athens, thank you very much.
Well, that was the view from Greece. Let's take you to Serbia now and talk to our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic in Belgrade. Wang Yi's visit there. Alyosha, what's on the agenda?
Chinese Foreign Minister came to Belgrade maybe an hour and a half ago, and he was greeted at the Belgrade airport by the Serbian counterpart, Nikola Selakovic. And it is third high-profile visit of the Chinese officials in this year alone to Serbia. A very important thing. Apparently, it is showing how important Serbia is for China, and of course China is for Serbia. And there are political reasons, and of course there are economic reasons. Speaking about economic reasons, for instance, a couple of huge Chinese companies are working here in the mining industry, and also they own a steelworks. Also, in a couple of weeks from now, we are expecting that the Chinese companies will start a construction of the subway, metro, here in Belgrade, also huge investment. And of course, the construction of Belgrade to Budapest high-speed railway is underway, and it is expected that maybe in the next year we will have first trains traveling from Belgrade to the border with Hungary. And of course, regarding political reasons, China supports strongly Serbia's integrity, territorial integrity, as well as Serbia's political position towards unified China, or one China, is well undoubted for years. So there is a lot of things, and there are a lot of reasons for this visit and for the meetings which are happening today and tomorrow. And just at the end to mention that tomorrow Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić will meet Wang Yi, and they will discuss about various issues, including signing a couple of very important agreements. At least we were told that by the Serbian officials here.
Okay, Alyosha Milenkovic watching that story for us in Belgrade. Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead.
Toys are one of the most effective sectors of the supply chain crisis. Find out if there are going to be enough gifts on the shelves this Christmas.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Climate change is happening right now. World leaders prepare for vital talks that will change the course of humanity. Action could save millions of lives. Failure could cost many more. Do they have the will to act quickly? Does the planet have the time to wait? Follow full coverage from the COP26 climate talks here on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV, online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
The UK's Finance Minister has unveiled his spending plans for the economy as it continues to recover from the impact of the pandemic. Chancellor Rishi Sunak is promising more funding for health and education, as well as targeted spending for poorer parts of the UK, as part of the government's so-called levelling up agenda. While growth forecasts are revised upwards with stronger than expected consumer demand after lockdown have eased, there are also concerns about inflation, though.
Now, a damning report into the UK's flagship test and trace programme has found it failed to achieve its objective of cutting COVID-19 infection levels. That's despite it receiving $50 billion in public funding. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, promised the system would be world-beating, but the government spending watchdog says the programme did not allow people to return to a normal way of life.
The pandemic-induced loss in working hours in 2021 will be equivalent to 125 million full-time jobs. That's according to an international labour organisation report that tracks the impact of the pandemic on workers and businesses worldwide. The report also suggests there has been a two-speed recovery between rich and poor countries, and if left unchecked, these inequalities could become entrenched.
The spate of mergers and acquisitions has boosted returns at Germany's biggest lender. Deutsche Bank saw net profits rise 7% in the third quarter to over $220 million. Despite volatile trading in its investment division, Deutsche has also been boosted by lower than expected take-up of its bad loan provision after the pandemic.
China's largest insurer, Ping An, has posted a 31% fall in third-quarter net profit, driven largely by investment losses. It's the company's worst quarterly profit drop since 2020. In a statement, Ping An also blamed the fall on shrinking household consumption, a complicated international environment, and recent flooding.
Russia has denied trying to blackmail Moldova with cut-price gas. The Financial Times is reporting that the country was offered discounted gas, but only if it altered its free trade deal with the European Union. Moldova's contract with Russian energy giant Gazprom expired in September, and so far a new deal has not been reached. The Kremlin denies politics played any part in the negotiations.
Well, let's bring you more on that story about the UK's Finance Minister unveiling his spending plans as the economy looks to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us now is our correspondent, Ollie Barrett in London. Hi, Ollie. Talk us through the growth forecast then that Mr Sunak unveiled, and what does it all mean for the UK economy?
Well, one thing it means is that Rishi Sunak has been able to unveil quite a large amount more spending on the UK economy than otherwise he would have been expecting to be able to just a matter of months ago. He's announced a couple of $100 billion worth of spending between now, extra spending between now and 2024, 2025. Spending going on schools, on health. There's some changes to the benefit system for people on lower incomes that he says will save individual lower income households hundreds of pounds each a year. And that is because the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, which puts together all of the economic forecasting that the government bases its spending review and budget on, that has been revised in the right direction from the government's perspective. Growth's been revised up, unemployment is not as high as forecasts expected that it would be at this point, and all of that means there's more money for Rishi Sunak to spend.
Thanks to this government's actions, they forecast the economy to return to its pre-COVID level at the turn of the year, earlier than they thought in March. Growth this year is revised up from 4 to 6.5%. The OBR then expect the economy to grow by 6% in 2022 and 2.1%, 1.3% and 1.6% over the next 3 years. Today's budget does not draw a line under COVID. We have challenging months ahead. And let me encourage everyone eligible to get their booster jabs as soon as possible. But today's budget does begin the work of preparing for a new economy post-COVID.
And Rishi Sunak, Ollie, talking there about those revised growth figures expected to drive a lot of this increased spending. What other measures have been announced then?
Well, there's a lot that Rishi Sunak has put forward today in terms of spending, but there's also the fact that he's acknowledged that inflation is an issue in the UK economy, as is some of these supply chain problems we've been seeing too. He says that the latter is something that is being seen all over the world, but the Labour Party, the opposition Labour Party, say that a lot of the spending on schools and health, for example, that the government's announced today is really needed because of some of the cuts that this government and previous Conservative governments have made to public spending in preceding years. They also warn of a cost of living crisis. They worry that even though public sector wages are going to be allowed to rise, a public sector pay freeze is being ended by this government, that it won't necessarily mean that people's wages keep pace with inflation. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, acknowledging that inflation is not something that the government can solve overnight.
Yeah, certainly a concern for many countries around the world at the moment. Ollie Barrett for us live in London. Thank you.
Democrats in the United States have unveiled plans for a tax on households worth over $1 billion. Along with a new higher rate of corporation tax, it's hoped the extra revenue will boost social spending and help fund America's green transition. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. John, well, you must be worried. A billionaire tax. Can it work?
Yes. Well, I am a bit worried, I have to be honest with you. That is absolutely right. Naweed and Jamie, hello. Well, look, the background to this is that the Democrats are having a very torrid time at the moment up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. They know that time is running out with the forthcoming congressional elections in November of next year and campaigning starting for that on the 1st of January of 2022 in a couple of months' time. And they still haven't got anything really, really big past the Congress. Now, they've got the $1.2 trillion basic infrastructure package ready to go and be signed off by the House, but they can't do that until the bigger $3.5 trillion one, the sort of Build Back Better one, has been agreed, and they're whittling it down and arguing amongst themselves. It's now down to about $1.7 trillion, and Democrats are furious with Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, who they blame for holding up this great reform that they want to bring through. So that's where we're at with that at the moment, and the president leaves for COP26 in a couple of days' time, so they would like to get it all sorted before he leaves. No sign that they will. So enter at this point a man called Ron Wyden, who is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He's a Democrat from Oregon in the northwest of the country. You've never heard of him before. Don't worry, he's not very well known. But he has revealed the existence of a billionaire's tax. It would affect 700 Americans, just 700 of us around the country. And it's anybody with $1 billion in assets or $100 million in wages for over 3 years. So that's clearly where I come in. Now, he is saying that there are two tax codes in America. There's PAYE, essentially pay as you go, which is what most people have. And then for billionaires, there's the chance to defer payments because they are billionaires and because they have lots of accountants working for them. And then when they defer those payments, they reinvest the money to make even more profits. And that's what they're trying to stop. Now, normally in America, you get taxed on income. So any money that you actually earn in a calendar year is what you are taxed on. In this case, if it goes through, it would be on stocks being held. So not just when you sell those stocks as now, but actually if you're holding them. And in the case of a home, not necessarily a yearly payment, I don't think, but some kind of capital gains tax with a massively increased interest rate would be applied. The downside to all of this, well, the rich fund a lot of politicians, including Democrats, so they may have something to say about it all. And then again, changing the tax code in America, enormously difficult. It's pages and pages long. I checked just now, the tax code here, 2,652 pages long. It's one of those, it's like the third rail in politics, you know. It's one of those things you don't really want to be touching unless you absolutely have to. But it's out there. A billionaire's tax is being thought about at the moment.
John, another story we must talk about. 20 years after it's set up in business there, China Telecom has been banned.
Well, this is an ongoing story for us, and I've been covering it since the beginning of the year. You will remember when President Trump was in power, they delisted Chinese companies, including telecom and also mobile, which was actually banned in 2019, by the way, and China Unicom as well here at the New York Stock Exchange. Well, now this is one step further because China Telecom, which is the biggest of all of them, is about to have its license to operate in America withdrawn completely. Now, the Federal Communications Commission, which is in charge of these things, says that it's Beijing's control that is doing this. And in other words, they're thinking about eavesdropping. They think someone's listening to the calls. That's what they think. Beijing says, of course, this is rubbish, and it comes just a handful of days after Liu He and Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary here, had a virtual conference together in which Janet Yellen raised her concerns, and pretty much top of Liu He's concerns was the issue of treating Chinese companies fairly in America. And now, a couple of days later, we get this. So Telecom has 60 days now in order to stop serving the people of America. I think a lot of them are in the Chinese community here, all over the country. And this, as you rightly say, Jamie, comes just under 20 years since they began offering service in this country. The company says it's very disappointing. They have hundreds of millions of customers all around the world in more than 100 different countries.
John, a final thought on the headline earnings.
Yes. Let me just run through these very quickly, because the big beasts of Wall Street have been out, and in the past 24 hours, Microsoft gave us its earnings, a double beat, top and bottom line. They smashed all expectations, and that is because Azure, their cloud business, is doing really well. I spotted some weakness in the numbers yesterday, but no one seems to be worried about that. Azure is reducing the need to rely on Windows for Microsoft. So the shares are now up 43% this year, 4% today. And the other two of great interest, Alphabet, which is Google and YouTube, huge advertising demand, doubling profit, shares up 4%. But Robinhood, you know, the company involved with all those meme stocks back in January, a big miss for the third quarter, fewer people buying crypto, fewer users, and the stock price is now below the IPO price. It's down 10% at the moment. Jamie and Naweed.
John Terrace in New York, thank you very much.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. When the chips are down, the semiconductor shortage that's costing the global car industry billions.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots.
France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year.
France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Louise Jabarkle. Our top stories: investment in renewables and energy efficiency, China's plan to bring carbon emissions to a peak in the next decade, and signing a deal for one of Europe's biggest ports, the China foreign minister in Greece on his European tour.
The EU's top court has ordered Poland to pay a daily fine of over $1 million in an escalating row over the rule of law. Earlier this year, Poland was ordered to suspend its disciplinary chamber for judges, but it hasn't yet done so. The EU has been further angered by a Polish court's ruling, which in effect rejected the primacy of EU law. Let's talk to our correspondent Giles Gibson in Brussels for us. Giles, why such a steep fine then from the European Court of Justice, and what's the reaction been like in Poland?
Well, this is actually the largest daily fine that the ECJ has ever handed down to an EU member state. So the court's saying in this ruling that if Poland doesn't suspend this disciplinary chamber, which is capable of firing judges and prosecutors, that it needs to do that to avoid serious and irreparable harm to the legal order of the European Union. As you might expect, we got a furious reaction shortly after this ruling was published by the governing Law and Justice Party in Poland, a Polish government spokesperson saying that on Twitter, calling this punishment and blackmail. The thing is, no matter how angry the Law and Justice Party or the Polish government get about this ruling, they don't have much choice in terms of whether they're actually going to pay these mounting fines, which could be over $1 million per day. That's because we are expecting the European Union to deduct these fines from the regular payments that it makes to Warsaw, those billions of euros that Poland receives every year as part of being a member state.
And this dispute, Giles, over the rule of law in Poland has been rumbling on for some time now. Any sign of a resolution between the two sides anytime soon?
Well, it was back in July that the ECJ originally made this ruling that the Polish government needs to suspend this disciplinary chamber. We have also previously in the past heard from the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki saying that this chamber will be dismantled, but he has never really given any sort of a clear timeline about when that might happen. This is, of course, part of this wider dispute that we've seen rumbling on now for months and months between Brussels and Warsaw, with lots of different flashpoints. The most recent one before this one was earlier this month, when a constitutional tribunal in Warsaw ruled that EU law does not take primacy over certain parts of the Polish constitution. That ruling in Warsaw triggered a really angry reaction from the European Commission, saying that this ruling is effectively a direct challenge to the legal framework that the EU is built upon.
Giles Gibson for us live in Brussels. Thank you.
Sudan's deposed Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has been allowed to return home after being taken into custody during a military coup earlier this week. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in the capital, Khartoum, to protest against the military takeover. The African Union has suspended Sudan's participation in all activities until civilian rule is restored.
The United States has launched an appeal to have WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange extradited from the UK to face charges in an American court. Assange is wanted over allegations of espionage and endangering national security after his website published leaked documents revealing details about US military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Efforts to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal have been given a boost, with stalled talks between Tehran and 6 major powers set to resume next month. Iran's top nuclear negotiator made the announcement after meeting EU officials in Brussels. The deal fell apart after the US withdrew in 2018 under President Trump. That led to Iran breaking agreed limits on its uranium enrichment.
Cambridge University has formally returned a looted artefact to Nigeria. The bronze cockerel was taken by British colonial forces in 1897. It was given to the university 8 years later. It's the first return of its kind by a British institution and comes as France prepares to return 26 similar artefacts to Nigeria.
Police in the United States state of New Mexico say they believe there were additional live rounds of ammunition on the set of the film Rust, where a cinematographer was shot dead last week. The actor Alec Baldwin accidentally shot and killed Halyna Hutchins while rehearsing with a prop gun. Court documents show the assistant director shouted "cold gun" before handing it over to Baldwin. But instead of being safe, the gun contained a live lead round and Hutchins was shot in the chest. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Tony Waterman in Austin in Texas for us. Tony, what else did the sheriff have to say?
Well, Jamie, this is the first time that we have heard from the Santa Fe County Sheriff, and it was absolutely chilling. He said that law enforcement has now collected 600 pieces of evidence in this case, including 3 firearms and also around 500 rounds of ammunition. He clarified that this is a mix of blanks, of dummy rounds, and also what they suspect to be live rounds of ammunition. He also said that they have recovered what they believe to be the spent casing in this shooting and also a projectile, a lead projectile, which was in fact recovered from the shoulder of Joel Souza, the director of the film, who was shot alongside Halyna Hutchins. And this is all information and ballistic evidence that is now going to be handed over to the FBI, where they're going to run further analysis. But, Jamie, as you mentioned, if that wasn't chilling enough, the sheriff also saying there may have been other live rounds of ammunition on set. Take a listen.
We suspect that there was other live rounds that were found on the set. I won't comment further on how they got there. That's still part of this investigation is active, so I won't comment on how they got there. But we suspect that they are there. That will be it will be determined when testing is done by the crime lab in reference to whether or not they are officially live rounds or not.
The focus of this investigation really seems to be turning now to the assistant director, David Halls, and also the 24-year-old armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the only 2 other people besides Alec Baldwin that the sheriff called out by name during this press conference. What happened on set seemed to be that while they were rehearsing, the assistant director took a gun off a tray that was prepared by Gutierrez-Reed and handed it to Alec Baldwin, saying "cold gun," when in fact we know now that there was a live round in there. And there have been multiple accusations that both of these individuals disregarded or did not maintain a safe working environment on other sets in the past, including reports that Gutierrez handed an 11-year-old child a gun that had not been properly checked on the set of The Old Way, starring Nicolas Cage.
Are we expecting any charges to be made anytime soon?
At this point in time, both the sheriff and the Santa Fe district attorney said that it's too early in their investigation to be putting forward any type of charges, but both of them also making it very clear that if there is evidence to do so, that they will not hesitate to bring charges and to also to arrest people in this case. There has been, of course, a lot of focus around Alec Baldwin himself, whether or not he is going to face charges. And when you talk to the law experts, they say that when it comes to criminal charges, Alec Baldwin, the actor, since he was handed this gun and did not know that it was with a live round and 2 other people were meant to be checking it before him, that he perhaps doesn't have as much liability. But Alec Baldwin, the producer of this film, could have liability because as the producer, he has a responsibility to make sure that there is safety being maintained on this set. So a little too early at this point, but both of them saying that if it warrants, they are going to press charges for anyone, one individual or multiple individuals in this case.
Tony, thanks for that. Tony Waterman there for us in Texas.
Well, as we heard earlier from Jaguar Land Rover, automakers globally are struggling with the semiconductor chip shortage, which could cost the global car industry $210 billion this year alone. That's according to US consultancy firm Alex Partners.
Our reporter Huang Fei has been talking to the Chinese car maker Guangzhou Automobile, who say the shortage could hit company earnings by up to 30%.
September was supposed to be a record-breaking month for GAC Iron, Guangzhou Automobile's new energy series. Nearly 20,000 orders came through, the brand's best number ever. But only 13,000 were actually delivered to customers. A shortage of chips means the company, like many others, is struggling to fulfill its orders.
The impact is severe. We only have 60 or 70% of the chips we need. It puts our production in limbo. We're not even sure if next week's chips will arrive. The biggest shortage is in the car's main control unit because they're designed to much higher safety standards. They need to operate from minus 40 degrees below freezing to more than 100 degrees Celsius. Car-grade chips like that are very scarce right now.
The chips aren't arriving for a number of reasons. Tensions between China and the U.S. prompted companies to stockpile chips back in 2019. Then COVID-19 hit and auto suppliers canceled orders over concerns about weak demand. Consumer electronics like smartphones and computers soaked up most of the capacity when car sales snapped back last summer. And a recent wave of the virus in Southeast Asia is disrupting factories that test and package semiconductors. Efforts to ramp up production simply can't solve the problem fast enough.
The chip production cycle is very long. It takes at least 2 years to go from design to mass production. The supply chain is complex. From raw materials to delivery, every step needs bolstering. But our biggest bottleneck right now isn't design, it's manufacturing.
China imports more than 60% of the semiconductor components it uses, and is still lagging in the so-called leading-edge part of the chip market. That's something the government wants to change. China plans to be at least 70% self-sufficient in developing chips by 2025. That goal has led to an unprecedented investment spree in the sector, fueled by a mix of public and private funding. In the first 5 months of this year, relevant Chinese firms received a total of $6.2 billion in venture capital. Experts say cultivating talent is among many obstacles that need to be overcome to achieve chip independence.
Many electrical engineers tend to choose a career in software design after they graduate from university. We need to fix this brain drain from hardware to software. Policy support such as tax cuts and market regulations will be important too. For now, automakers can sign protective contracts to secure the silicon. This helps chip suppliers too, because they're also worried about waste due to excess capacity once the crisis is over.
Manufacturers hope the shortage will begin to ease by the first half of 2022. Ion is joining other Chinese car makers and tech firms to design their own chips. But before that comes to fruition, they will have to buckle up for what could be their first winter of slashed earnings. Huang Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
The UK is facing a perfect storm of supply problems, COVID-19, Brexit and a shortage of lorry drivers. The combination has some retailers warning of stock shortages unless drastic action is taken. But Christmas isn't quite cancelled just yet, as Juliet's Man reports.
Look who's in town to unveil this year's Most Wanted.
Merry Christmas!
Gizmos to spark creativity and imagination.
We've gone back to role-play toys, we've gone back to cute and cuddly, and there's been kind of less, what I would say, less influenced by films in the background.
From the familiar to a range of educational toys, the shelves here are rammed.
Up in Lapland, we have our own supply chain because we build our own toys, you see. We have all the workshops where the elves put together all of the toys after we receive the letters from the children. We don't have to outsource in many ways. And of course, we're our own delivery service as well, given that we have the reindeer.
Santa might have dodged it, but sector-wide, inventory is lean as suppliers navigate severe air, sea and land shipping snags.
Funko, who make these, say 70% of them are produced in Vietnam, where they've had some big port issues. But shipping is only part of the puzzle. Another is inflation. The price of materials is rising fast, from plastics to packaging, wood, metals, even electronic components. So it might not just be a case of getting hold of a bestseller, the price might go up too.
Sending a single container from Asia to Europe costs 10 times more than it did a year ago, which eventually gets passed on to consumers. US toy makers expect retail price increases around 25%. Bosses say everything from food to decorations will go up. Furniture maker DFS expects prices to rise 3 to 4% next year.
We've been building stock. At this moment in time, we're in a very, very strong position. If I had a magic crystal ball that could predict the future, I think I'd be, the top of everybody's list, wouldn't I? But at the moment, I can just say we've built a very strong basis for the peak period.
As the festive season draws nearer and demand swells, toy stores are hoping they'll still have something for everybody under the tree. But to avoid missing out, consider Christmas shopping earlier than usual. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, 100 days to the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Teams from around the world train hard for the challenge of a lifetime.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. There are now just 100 days to go until the Winter Olympics begin in Beijing, and athletes from around the world are busy in their final weeks of preparation.
Here in Europe, that includes Germany's luge team, which is hoping to take home a gold medal and is training hard to make that happen. Ryan Thompson reports.
The countdown is on. Not just to reach the bottom of this luge course, but until the world's best are competing on the Olympic stage. In the hills of Germany, training is now in full swing, with lugers of all ages hoping to come home from the Beijing Winter Games with a gold medal. Felix Loke took home the top prize for the first time at just 20, and is hoping to do it again for a fourth time in 2022.
There are 100 days until the Olympic Games start in Beijing. How is your training going?
My life right now is on the track. We start the preparation for this Olympic season, and at the moment everything works really good. The training was okay, so I have no problems, no injuries, and that's the important thing.
It takes more than being able to slide at speeds of up to 150 kilometers per hour to get ready for the Olympic Games. Luge is all about small, precise movements. Cardio and strength training are key for a perfect slide on the ice, and Loke spends hours staying in top shape.
Training is a grueling 7-day, hours-long process where competitors are looking to perfect their form while on the track. Eventually, they reach the finish line, where they take a look back at their ride to see what they did right and what they did wrong, before they go again and again and again.
When we have winter, we train, every day. So I always say I have not a week. I have no Saturday, no Sunday, so no days to enjoy the time at home.
And it's that kind of focus that propelled him to victory in 2010 and 2014. After a small mistake in the 2018 Pyeongchang Games cost him the medal, he's now vowing to make a comeback.
You've taken medals home before in the Olympic Games, but how are you feeling about your chances this time?
The chances for the medal, I would say they should be not so bad, but Olympics are always a little bit special.
Lok is not the only world-class luger that's heading to Beijing. Athletes from Austria and Russia are likely to give him a run for his money, right up until the final slide. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Saxony.
Recycling is all the rage and now well established across China. Attempts to encourage people to change habits have been going on for years.
There are different schemes depending on where you live, but just how effective are they? Nicole Ng's been finding out.
Trash. We generate over 2 billion tons of it every year, 80% of which will end up incinerated or in landfill. In China, that figure is even higher, 98% according to the World Bank. But the country is experimenting with solutions to sort and recycle. Auntie Jane, for example, is one of over 300,000 trash sorters in the city of Chengdu. She's been helping residents at this compound for around a year now.
In the beginning, they put their kitchen waste in with everything else, but I will tell them and they will see the posters. So they know now, and when they bring it out, it's already sorted.
It's taken time for residents to build these new habits.
We have some glass bottles, some cardboard bags.
But it's a start, and it's just one of several solutions around the city. In this older residential community, they've paired up with the company AOBag, which not only collects and sorts recycling for residents, but also pays them for it.
I've earned around 30-something yuan, not including this lot. Here's maybe another, up to 12 yuan. Anyway, these are things we don't want, so it's income.
AOBag has developed an app to teach residents what can and cannot be recycled. It also lets them know if they've made a mistake.
The picture got sent to the user's phone. In the past, we don't know whether we do good thing or bad thing. There's no feedback.
The company collects over a dozen types of materials, fabrics and soft plastics, as well as the usual glass and paper. Since starting out 4 years ago, they've scaled up operations with hundreds of drop-off points in Chengdu alone.
AOBag will pick up to 800 of these bags a day. That means over the course of 2 weeks, about 100 of these bundles, each weighing about a ton, and that's just of cardboard.
It's a model powered by profit, materials sold on to downstream processors. A model the company argues is more effective. But as the country aims for an ambitious target of 60% household recycling in 4 years, it may be less of a competition and more of a race, with tons still to sort through. Nicole Ng, CGTN.
The headlines again: investment in renewables and energy efficiency. China unveils its plan to bring carbon emissions to a peak in the next decade.
Signing a deal for one of Europe's biggest ports, China's foreign minister ends his visit to Greece and moves on to Serbia.
And Europe's top court fines Poland €1 million a day as Warsaw's row with Brussels over EU law rumbles on.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps too: Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.